Hey, Leesa, how are you doing today?
Great, Julian. So good to see you.
Well, it's great to see you as well. It feels like we haven't talked in years. It's probably been 12 months or something. It feels like ages. So how have you been doing? Because I've been following you for a while, and it looks like you are very busy. I see you on every possible interview, podcast, magazines. You're all over the place. How are you doing in your marketing world?
Things are really good. I left RingCentral, as you know, a little bit ago, and since then have been out on my own, doing some consulting, doing some fractional CMO work, and I'm continuing to look for what I hope will be that next perfect job. But in the meantime, really, I'm enjoying the variety and the learning and the opportunities to do some things on kind of a fractional and temporary basis, and it's been a blast.
So just for the people who may not be as lucky as me and may not have had the chance to work with you previously, just a little bit about your background, because you've worked for quite a few big companies out there. You've worked for Vonage for a while. You worked for AT&T as well. I think you were CMO at Jenny Craig and at RingCentral, where we met. But you were also at Jenny Craig. You were part of the top 75 CMOs by execs reps. That was back in 2014. So you've been in similar roles for a while already. You are a pretty incredible marketer, which is why I absolutely wanted you to have in this seat, even though it means you have to help me fix the technical issues we have with the first few episodes. But I thank you for that. Have you always been in marketing? Has it been your job your entire life?
Yeah, for the most part. I started my career in the advertising agency world. And, when I first started in the agency world, I thought that was absolutely what I wanted to do forever after. And the account I was working on, the agency I worked for, I was working for 𝗥𝗲𝗶𝘀, and we had 𝗥𝗵𝗶𝘀 as a client. 𝗥𝗵𝗶𝘀 went on to become Singular, went on to become AT&T, but our New York office pitched what was then the Verizon business, or what is the Verizon business. And they won that. So we resigned the smaller account, which was 𝗥𝗵𝗶𝘀. And it's kind of the transition went through. 𝗥𝗵𝗶𝘀 called me and asked me to come over to work for them as on the client side, which was quite a compliment, of course. And my first foray into not being in an agency. And I almost instantly fell in love with it. I as much as I enjoyed the agency world, it was mostly focused on advertising. And by moving over client side, I got to look at the much bigger picture of kind of all the finance and the data and the things that go behind the scenes to create the whole picture, as opposed to just the ads that are obviously kind of the magical part, the fun part in some ways, but not the whole business side. So I fell in love with the larger business of marketing.
And you tell me if those are just rumors or if it's actually the truth, but I've heard that your mom still tells stories of you as a kid singing jingles in your sleep. Is that a true story, or is it not? And is it where your love for marketing is coming from?
Yeah, it's a true story. They've actually brought it back, but Burger King had a jingle that was, have it your way, have it your way. And you can see I don't have any career in singing. But I think I've always had kind of a love for jingles, and that's something that throughout my career I've actually managed to either influence or land with brands that had some jingle as part of their lore. So when I was at Vonage, we had the woohoo, woohoo, again, don't have career in singing, and Farmers Insurance, which I oversaw the brand there for about 5 years, has the "We Are Farmers," and it's something I just have a lot of heart for. As a way to be memorable and get into people's memory, which is the whole the crux of brand marketing, is to be memorable and to be somebody that is in the aided and unaided consideration set when someone is thinking about a brand. And I think those jingles do help to keep them top of mind when it's time to start shopping for whatever it is that you need.
And did you actually study in order to be in marketing at a later stage? I mean, singing jingles as a kid is one thing, but thinking yourself a marketer as you grow up is another thing. Did you actually plan to land in a marketing job, or did it just happen?
Yeah, I think it's something I always had some love for. But when I graduated from college, I actually thought I was going to write for a living. I had been working as a college student. I've been working for an interior design trade magazine that has since folded. But at the time, I thought I'd graduate and I would go to work as a writer. And then my very, very first job, I was writing technical manuals for computer printers. It was really, really glamorous. But that's actually what led me into the advertising agency world, was after I kind of graduated, or whatever the right word is, from writing technical manuals. My very first agency job was with a small shop, and we had data products printers as a client. And the fact that I knew enough about printers to help write technical manuals got my foot in the door there as someone who, I understood the products. And so that helped me get that first job. And then I transitioned from there to 𝗕𝗵𝗶𝘀 on IBM's business, which then moved over after some time to, like I said, 𝗕𝗵𝗂𝗲𝗄 services. Then jumped over to the client side. They became AT&T Wireless. I spent, almost 10 years there. And then there we are.
That's interesting that most of the marketers I talk to, and that very much includes myself, did not necessarily plan to be in marketing in the first place. It's kind of something that I feel marketing is a nice juncture between your skills and your passion, at least for many people, and you happen to be able to do what you enjoy doing, be paid for it. And that's a great career choice, but I don't feel there are so many people that actually studied thinking at some point, I'm going to be a marketer. And I'm not even sure so many people, before having a first real marketing job, can really define what marketers do on a daily basis. There's so many different roles and variations of what marketing, even from one industry to the other. Do you feel you've had like a large variety of experiences in marketing? Is it very different from working for Jenny Craig or RingCentral? Was it the same role? Was it very different what you were doing?
I look at marketing maybe a little bit differently than some people do. And I think that's because I've had this, really kind of, someone once called it a mosaic background, and worked in so many different categories. And my feeling on marketing is it's understanding the needs of a consumer and then talking to them in a way that resonates with them at the time that's most important for them to think about that product. So while products have been vastly different, RingCentral and Jenny Craig are kind of almost opposite ends of the spectrum as far as the weight loss versus unified communications as a service. But we're still solving a problem that someone, or helping them solve a problem that they believe that they need to fix or to solve. Same thing with farmers insurance, right? It's very, very different from UCAF, but people need insurance. You need to kind of talk to them at the right time and the right place about something that's important to them and understand their needs and their desires, and then give them the information they need to make an educated decision on the right project or the right product. Excuse me. So, when you talk about education, like leading to becoming a marketer, I went to UCLA. They don't have the most practical courses for that type of thing. It's a liberal arts university, so I studied English literature. I can read, write, and analyze. And I think that gave me kind of foot in the door to start a marketing career. And then it just becomes understanding consumers and then finding the right ways to talk to them through interesting, ideally, storytelling.
And was there points in your career where you told yourself, I want to become a CMO? Because there are many, many people doing marketing around the world. Few of them end up being a CMO for a company. Was that an ambition of yours, or same thing as coming to marketing? Did it just happen this way because one job leading to another, you ended up being a CMO? Was this a goal that you gave yourself earlier in your career?
I don't think I set it as a firm goal. I think, I feel like we're talking about my parents a lot, but one of the things my father has always said to me is, if you're going to do something, do it right. And so I think, for me, it's important to put my best foot forward, work as hard as I can towards anything I'm doing. And, when it came to my marketing career, I've always just tried to do the best that I can at the job. understand the business, understand the people, try to be a good leader, and do what I can to advance the business and the goals of the business. And as part of that, that's just kind of gotten a continual growth in my career that has landed me where I am. So I think it's a combination of some luck and some hard work and desire. But I didn't, when I was 20, say, "Oh, I'm going to be a CMO when I grow up." I thought I'd have a good career in marketing, and there I am.
And you're not just doing marketing. I mean, that's your day job. But I see also, checking a little bit your background, I've seen that you've been a mentor with Effie Worldwide and with Adweek for quite some time. I mean, looking at your LinkedIn, it looks like you've been doing this kind of thing for a very long time. And I was not too surprised because the experience I've had with you, I've seen you trying to mentor others and help others out all the time. So it's not that it's surprising, but why are you doing this? What is the motivation behind? What are you getting out of it? Because I guess it's taking quite some time as well. So why are you doing that, and what are you getting out of it?
It's I love the mentoring side of things, and I love that Effie and Adweek in particular have kind of formalized programs where I can engage with people at earlier stages in their careers and talk to them about, in the case of Effie, they go through a boot camp and I'm helping them to present their case to either ideally pass or not pass their boot camp class. In the case of Adweek, it's a little less structured it's not a class, it's more just relationship. But I find it's a great opportunity for me to learn about the state of business. I mean, the business is different for someone early in their career now than when I was at that stage of my career. So it's incredibly educational for me. It's also an opportunity where I can hopefully impart some knowledge, or at least, I don't even try to really, I wouldn't say I'm trying to impart knowledge so much as trying to help people think about things from different angles. So one of the tacks I try to consistently take is, here's a situation I dealt with, here's how I thought about it. I'd love to see how you think about it. And that, by mentoring, I think with that tone and that kind of thought process, it gives me an opportunity to learn from them, because it's like, well, here's how I think about it, and I would do this. It's like, okay, that makes sense too. Why and how, and that creates more conversation. I think just opens up your different ways in to start to solving problems. So I love having the opportunity to give back a little bit, but there's some. I don't want to call it selfishness, but there's the learning I get out of it is equally valuable.
So something you just said is pretty interesting, because I feel exactly the same way. What you were doing in the early days of your marketing career is quite different from the way we do marketing nowadays. When I started, it could be related also to the fact that I've changed industry quite a few times, but in the early days of my career, marketing was really about having the right branding, having the right message. It was not about measuring absolutely everything you could do. And obviously the internet has changed it, because now everything is somehow trackable, and therefore it's way more ROI oriented than it used to be. But how do you feel about the evolution of marketing? And do you miss the old days of more branding, less tracking, or do you actually embrace this new measurable kind of marketing we're doing today?
Yeah, that's such a great question, because I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. There was a time in marketing where I think we just kind of hoped things worked, and while we were tracking sales or we were tracking the results, we didn't have the ability, like you said, in the digital world to really get down to the nitty-gritty details. But I also think the amount of data we have now can lead to some analysis paralysis. It can lead to overly focusing on the absolute last touch or on the last touch point, and neglects the larger picture of the importance of brand, which can be harder to measure. I mean, there are ways to measure the importance of brand, but it's a long tail. It has lots of touch points. Every experience a customer has is reflects, or the brand reflects in every experience, every touch point, and that can influence whether or not someone makes a purchase decision. Our data often still goes back to just one or two touch points, or overly focuses on that last one that's more attributable, more easy to point a number at. It's both magical to have all the data, and at the same time can be frustrating because it's not always, I think, as crisp as we'd like to think it is, or as our finance teams would like to think it is.
That I can feel. Actually, I like the fact that you talk about this because, first, would it be right to assume that from everything you've said and from my personal experience working with you, that branding is really your DNA? That's a part of marketing you love the most, even though obviously you enjoy touching everything, which is very much the role of a CMO. But is it brand still your first love and what you are most passionate about?
I would say not exactly, because while I love building brands, and this is one of the reasons actually, when we talk about 𝗕𝗵𝗂𝗲𝗃 Academy, I love 𝗕𝗵𝗂 in particular. Building a brand without results, if the brand is not driving sales, then who cares? It could be the most beautiful advertising in the world, but if it isn't attributable back to what is doing something for the business, it doesn't matter. So I like to look at my skill set and my strengths at being at the kind of intersection of brand and demand, where you are using the brand to bring in more business, and that to me is what's most important.
So you say that, but over the past few years, since the pandemic, we've seen so many companies, large and small, all industries, having to cut their budget quite significantly. Mm-hmm. And my experience from talking to other marketers is that usually the first thing that gets cut when there is a budget cut, it's usually branding, which to me does not make any sense because that's incredibly short-sighted. It's like killing the top level of your funnel. If you're looking at short-term ROI, sure, cut the branding because you're still gonna, whoever is already in your conversion funnel is still gonna convert and you're gonna get your dollars back. And that's probably the right decision if you're really looking short-term. But in the long run, you're gonna kill your business 2-3 quarters or even a couple of years down the road. How do you feel about this kind of decisions, regardless of the industry, regardless of the business? How would you recommend when your finance team tells you that we have to cut budget, and that's the case for so many companies, you don't necessarily have the choice. Where would you start? Is that the right thing to start with branding, or how would you tackle this?
I mean, I think that's probably the $64,000 question. It is a big challenge because, as we were saying a minute ago, the stuff that is the easiest to attribute back to spend is the lowest funnel work and the lowest funnel communications with customers. But the brand awareness and the brand consideration are the things that bring them in to begin with. So I think if you make a cut to the brand as a brand spend, it's short-sighted. That said, I think the thing we get confused about as marketers, but even more so once you step outside of marketing, is brand is not just advertising, and it's not just even paid communication. It's every single touch point a customer has with a company. So the brand should resonate through customer service, through every phone call, through the salespeople, and there should be a kind of brand tenet and a crux of what the company stands for that is always at the center of those communications, regardless of what they are, paid or otherwise. So I think that's one of the hardest things to educate companies on, that it's not just advertising, it's not just paid. But if you've got to make a hard decision on what to cut, I think you need to be looking at the whole picture, and not cutting one channel 100%. It's looking across everything and being as efficient as you can without kind of cutting your nose to spite your face. Because I think, as you've said, during the pandemic and some of these kind of challenges we've had with the macroeconomic environment, a lot of companies are doing some major cuts to brand that maybe give them a pop, in their revenues for a week, a month, or a quarter or two, but they'll see the long-term results, over time, and I think it will impact companies' longer-term success.
Coming back to your background, your personality, if I may, there is something that I'm always wondering. Are you suffering from the imposter syndrome? Did that ever happen to you? And Just before you answer, the reason why I'm asking that, beside the fact that I think pretty much everyone at some point suffers from the imposter syndrome, is when you and I were preparing that chat today in the background, I could feel from the questions you were asking me that you always want everything to be perfect. You always want to be ready for whatever's coming your way. And it's a little bit back to what you were saying about your dad saying, if you do something, do it right. I have that experience working with you that you always want everything to be perfect. Is it coming from you having some kind of imposter syndrome? Is it just because you just want everything to be perfect and that's the end of it? Did you ever have that feeling in your career today or in the past?
Interesting question. I think I have very high standards for myself, and I always have. And I don't think that's imposter syndrome so much as just, I have kind of expectations I set for myself that are probably, in some cases, overly high. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. I think there's an expression, if I can say it properly, but don't let perfect get in the way of good. And that's something I do need to, and often do say to my teams and to myself. Sometimes it's better to just get something out the door and iterate than to wait for it to be perfect. As it comes to imposter syndrome, I don't love that expression. I think we all have kind of ebbs and flows and how confident we feel about things, how good things are, and how we feel about them. I just want to be, in every situation I can, setting myself up for success and setting the people around me up for success. So that, maybe it comes across as a little bit of perfectionism. I think it's more just, the more prepared you are, the more likely you are to succeed.
And since you do a lot of mentorship, especially with people who are earlier on their marketing career, I'm guessing you've met quite a few people who are suffering from this, especially people who are climbing pretty quickly the ladder, and it can be difficult to feel confident about your new role. What is your piece of advice for people earlier in their marketing career that feel like they're probably not where they should be yet, or they are not confident yet with their current role? Do you have any specific advice for people in this situation?
When I'm working with folks who are being promoted, I think they need to probably understand that they've been trusted, and there's a reason they've been trusted. Someone has seen something in them that they believe in them, and okay, fake it till you make it. Okay, maybe a little, or have some humility and ask questions at the same time. Understand that there's still a lot to learn. I think that does more for you than pretending. And I think imposter syndrome comes up when people do pretend, as opposed to when they are diving in and spending the time to learn and get to know things. But I would say if someone's feeling insecure in a new role, there is a reason they were chosen, and that they have been tapped to give something a go. So continuing to do the work, ask the questions, ask for feedback. And I think creating good feedback loops is a really good way for people to learn and grow and get more confidence in what they're doing.
Something that you just said now about being humble, but also understanding that if you are where you are, it's probably because someone trusted you. So they must have seen something that maybe you don't see it, but if other people have seen it, probably there is something there. There is something about empathy in what you're describing here, and that's probably the first word I would use to describe your leadership. Again, we've not been working together for 20 years. We've worked just a couple of years maybe together, but that's really something that was pretty obvious in the way you deal with other people within your team, within other teams, whether marketing or completely different department. Empathy seems to be something that probably would be a pillar of your leadership style. When you do mentorship with people who are trying to be future leaders, what do you recommend? Because there are as many leadership styles as there are leaders out there, so you can't just copy someone else. You have to make it your own. But what would be your recommendation from what you've seen, from what you've experienced, for someone who wants to be a good leader and not just a manager on paper? What are the things to keep in mind to actually get your team on board?
Well, first off, Thank you for saying you believe I lead with empathy, because that's something I've worked really hard towards. The fact that I'm very goal-driven sometimes leads me to be like, just let's get things done, and worry a little bit less about how. And I spent a lot of time trying to improve on that. That's one of my areas of learning. And I think, when I talk to people about growing their leadership style, or when you think about a leadership style, you're exactly right. Everybody is going to be slightly different. I take a couple of things that I think about that are important to me. Is I like to lead the way I would like to be led. So I try personally to give people a lot of space and let them learn in a safe environment for themselves, but then, also give them guardrails so that they don't have the opportunity to actually fail. And I think people need to learn to figure out what works best for them. But it's asking for feedback is probably one of the biggest things. And then as a leader, I think it's very important to give feedback, for good and bad, in the moment, and not hoard it all up and wait till the end of the week or wait for a performance evaluation. But rather, as a meeting wraps, like, that was fantastic, and I really like how you did X, Y, and Z. Or you might have been more effective if you did ABC. This may have been perceived as X. Was that in your intention? So it's being just aware of how things are perceived.
Well, there's something else here. Earlier, we were talking about how the CMO role has changed over the years and how there is more analytics and more tracking, but it's not just that. The past few years have also, because of the pandemic, changed the way we work. Remote is now a thing. Hybrid work is now a thing. And being a leader, I don't know what was your environment back when you were CMO at Jenny Craig, but I'm assuming most of your team, if not your entire team, was actually with you on a daily basis in the office, which is very different from being a leader in a remote world where you have to motivate, understand, give feedback to people who are a screen away. How did that affect your leadership in any way? Did you have to change your ways, or was it just a natural evolution?
I think we all had to learn to do things differently. I mean, interacting with this little box is hard. And what I tried to do was really kind of up the ante on how much time I dedicate to spending with individuals. My direct reports, I've always made a big point of trying to have regular one-on-one communication. When you're not in the same office, it's hard to do a drive-by. Just pop your head in and, hey, how are things going? So really pushing that to be something that is you stick to kind of religiously, I think is really important in a virtual environment. I think the other thing is, and I do the same thing, or try to do the same thing in a conference room, but if someone's quiet, pulling them out and encouraging them to speak and to participate becomes even harder, I think, in a virtual environment, especially with the way audio tends to be kind of one way. It can't talk over me if I'm talking. If I continue to talk, you are not able to interject. Whereas in a conference room, you can shout over me or whatever that might be. So being cognizant of just kind of those differences in the technical side of communication. But it's hard. It's really hard. And I think some people have really thrived in these environments, and other people, especially people who are really good at their jobs but aren't blowhards or aren't big talkers and aren't overly expressive, can get lost in the shuffle in a way that in a face-to-face environment you might be able to tell there's more going on.
I have very similar experience here, and the good thing is, if you are about to take a CMO role and you're going to be managing teams cross borders, you're going to have to deal with people you're not going to be in front of. Whether you do hybrid, in office, or remote, you're going to have to work with people remotely at some point. So I think that's a great exercise, but I agree. There is a lot of learnings and adaptation to bring what works in the office to a more remote work. While we almost at time, I have one last question for you. And that should be an easy one for you since you've been doing mentorship for so many years. But someone who starts a marketing career today and would like to be a CMO like you, would like to walk in your steps, what would be your top piece of advice today for these people?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. So I'm going to maybe not give you a one sentence answer. I think it's saying yes to things, trying new things, having, if there's an opportunity to take on a responsibility that's a little outside your comfort zone, take it. That to me has been something I've been a little bit, I'll say a little bit of luck, where I've had, roles where someone left their job and it's like, hey, Leesa, can you help out until we backfill that position? And they end up, maybe not backfilling. And that just becomes part of my responsibility. And I think it's asking a lot of questions. And then I think the other side of it is learning the finance side, learning the data, learning the analytics, and making sure that that's where you're deeply rooted. Because if you're thinking about things from a financial and business perspective, it gives you a lot more opportunity to influence, different areas of the business, and gives you more just kind of gravitas when it comes to talking about why the marketing is important. If you can back it up with data, with analytics, with facts and figures, you get a lot more respect in a non-marketing environment.
I love that you're saying that, because that's what I've been calling the schizophrenic side of being a CMO, where you have to be creative, but you have to be analytical as well. You have to know how to write something that sounds good or design something that looks good, but you have to be able to read an Excel sheet and a dashboard and make decisions based on KPIs, and that forces CMOs to really use both sides of their brain. I don't know if that's still a thing today, where you're more left brain or right brain. I don't think we say that anymore. But you have to use your entire brain nowadays, and that's really what the CMO job is all about.
Well, and I think the other thing that we all have to remember is not everyone's going to be good at everything. So surrounding yourself with good people, hiring people who can help and can be, entrusting them to do their jobs is probably the most important thing, because no one is going to be good at every single aspect of marketing in a large company. They need the teams that can do the work. And being a good leader doesn't mean you have to do every single thing. And that can be hard too, getting out of stuff and letting people do what they're good at, and just staying out of the way sometimes can be challenging.
I would agree with that. A huge thank you, Leesa. That was incredibly inspiring. I decided to start this podcast because I wanted inspiration from great leaders, but also just because I enjoy the chats and talking with you. That just a shame it doesn't happen more often. Thank you very much for accepting the invitation, and thank you for taking the time and bringing all that value to the podcast. Thank you so much.
Yeah, great to see you. Bye.